live cast. Excuse me, I'm sorry, Classic Comics live cast. Sorry, I was distracted. So I haven't had a lot of time to prepare for this one. So I'm just going to be kind of hitting a few different subjects. Uh, no real theme to them. Before I do that, though, I did want to say so I hit 300 subs. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. I think it was beginning not of this week, but of last week. And I had intended to do a live stream last weekend to talk about that, kind of celebrate it. But I had my National Guard drill and it was busy, so I didn't have time. But I do want to start with thanking those who have subscribed. Thank you to all of you. And let's see, I got a couple other things I wanted to talk about. Okay, so let me bring this up. So I want to start saying a friend of mine, a fellow YouTuber. Let me see if I can bring this up. Let me bring this. There it is. So, a friend of mine, fellow YouTuber, by the name of 24/7. If you've seen me on comics on Loki's comic book roundtable, you know he joins us on there as well. So he's having some. He's in a financial bind, basically. He had some health issues that have put him in a hole, and so he could use a hand. And Loki has set up a GoFundMe for him. I've donated some already. If you can, uh, visit that GoFundMe and give what you can. There is a link in the description on the video on the live stream that you can go to, and I also have that up on my community tab on my channel, so you can go and take a look at that as well. And if you could go there and perhaps donate a little, we would appreciate it. Or if you can, at least maybe share the link around on Twitter and other social media platforms. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's talk about what was I? Let's talk about James Gunn first. Okay, so the plans for the whole DCU. Now, of course, James Gunn had that video he put out online talking about his plans, all the different projects and everything. I probably would have done a stream on that last weekend as well if I'd been able to. But anyway, subsequent to that, I think actually before and after, he's had some interviews where he's addressed the whole Cavill thing. And he has said some things, basically that were not flattering to the people that run Warner Brothers. And some of them don't like that. Apparently, throwing your bosses under the bus doesn't go over so well. Now, these articles I haven't read them ahead of time because it was a busy day. So let's just kind of go through this, see what it says. So DC co-CEOs James Gunn and Peter Safran. Oh, and thank you also, J-Man. Thank you for the message on the subs. I thank you, man. I appreciate it. I forgot to mention that earlier as well. Now, so DC Studios co-CEOs James Gunn and Peter Safran have reportedly already caused some upset among certain Warner Brothers Discovery executives due to their recent comments against the old DC regime. After the Warner Brothers Discovery Media merger placed David Zaslav in charge, the newly placed CEO quickly began the search for his answer to Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige to lead the DC franchise moving forward. After all, it was clear things weren't working out under former DC Films president Walter Hamada. Having gone through plenty of candidates, that hunt finally came to a head with the appointment of the Suicide Squad director James Gunn and Shazam producer Peter Safran to serve as co CEOs of the newly founded DC Studios and develop a project slate with a sense of cohesion moving forward. In the 3 months since their appointment, the duo has developed a slate of projects from the new DCU that has since been revealed in a big marketing push. The campaign has come with plenty of interesting comments from Gunn and Safran, some of which seem to be frustrating certain high ups at Warner Brothers Discovery. According to the Hollywood Reporter's latest newsletter, DC Studios CEOs Gunn and Safran have reportedly managed to ruffle some feathers with certain Warner Brothers Discovery execs due to their recent comments about the old regime. The newsletter points out that among the slew of comments, Gunn and Safran have already made the previous management of the DCU. Some were not exactly tactful. Did I say that right? The comments Gunn and Safran have already made, yes, have already made were not tactful. The president or president, the report stated that some of those from the old regime are still now in charge at Warner Brothers Discovery, and there have been quite a few ruffled feathers. The DC Studios duo are described by The Hollywood Reporter as movie makers and not corporate. Unlike other executives who, quote, either toe the line, express generic and genial statements, or retweet praise, Gunn has been doing things his way by swatting down Twitter rumors and even holding fun polls for fans. Hello, Masters Maniac Mexico. Yeah, it's getting there to 400. I mean, it's at over 350 already in like less than 2 weeks, which for me is like meteoric growth. So we'll see. Hopefully by the spring I'll be approaching 400. We'll see. Now, speaking to journalists at the private DCU Slate event, Gunn criticized DC's past as, quote, pretty messed up, unquote, and noted how Warner Brothers was giving away IPs like they were party favors. And they have the quote here: the history of DC is pretty messed up. No one was minding the mint. They were just giving away IPs like they were party favors to any creators who smiled at them. What we are going to do is promise that everything from our first project going forward is going to be unified, unquote. A second comment that may or may not refer to DC's past zoned in on his intent to avoid putting hundreds of millions of dollars into a film where a screenplay is only two-thirds of the way done. We're not going to be making movies and putting hundreds of millions of dollars into a film where a screenplay is only two-thirds of the way done, and we have to finish it while we're making the movie. I've seen it happen again and again, and it's a mess. I think it's the primary reason for the deterioration of quality of films today versus 20, 30 years ago. I'll blast by Doomcock and Saw. Yeah, I don't, I don't see that happening. But hey, thanks for the vote of confidence and the positive thinking. I appreciate it. So the search for the DC head honcho was one that lasted a long time, with Zaslav reportedly approaching Arrowverse boss Greg Berlanti, the Lego movie producer Dan Lin, and even Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige for the top job. And yet, for various reasons, Warner Brothers Discovery never managed to reach a deal with anybody. I think people just didn't want the job, to be honest. I think it's such a mess. And, with these big franchises, they're so public, and the audiences can be the fan base can be very combative. And I think a lot of them just didn't want to deal with it. So far, after a long search for both an effective choice and one that would satisfy that fandom, things seem to be working out under Gunn and Safran. The reactions to the slate were largely positive. Were they? I don't know. I thought reactions were kind of equivocal, really. But fans seem to be enjoying Gunn's more transparent approach. Yeah, I think they do. And excitement for DC seems the highest it's been in years. You live on positive thinking. Yeah, it can definitely help. Can get you a long way. You're right. Okay, so David Zaslav was quick to axe a number of Warner Brothers executives on his arrival. Still, many remain, some of which will undoubtedly be bitter after the firing of their former colleagues. And by the way, so Masters Maniac Mexico, what was your feeling on Gunn's announcements? I mean, did you like the projects he announced, or did you dislike them, or were you just kind of neutral on it? How did you feel about it, or did you even care? So it's not surprising that Gunn and Safran's criticism of their years of past work to get DC off the ground would lead to some resentment. Now, that being said, they aren't the only ones who have been critical of the old regime, as Zaslav himself said back in November that they have, quote, an awful lot to do and an awful lot to undo, unquote. At Warner Brothers Discovery as a whole, with the CEO firmly in agreement with Gunn and Safran, they will undoubtedly be safe. Granted, these comments against certain execs would not be all fireable offenses at any means, but rather just negative for their future working relationships. But either way, after how long it took to find DC Studios CEOs and develop this master plan, the duo may be Warner Brothers Discovery's hottest commodity at the moment. So Masters Maniac Mexico says, I had a hope in the restart, but the announcements killed that small plant growing within me. Yeah, that's kind of my feeling on it. I mean, I don't think what they announced was awful, but it's a lot of it didn't really excite me. And I'm kind of looking down the road, I think, at what they plan to do with some of these characters, and I don't think I'm going to like it. And I don't think a lot of people will. All right, so it's hard to disagree with the pair's criticism of the past DC management. After all, fans have been doing the same for years. Yeah, true. Despite housing the biggest household names on the planet, the old regime failed to generate box office results, positive reception, or properly create a cohesive universe after years of efforts. In general, whether it frustrates certain Warner Brothers Discovery executives or not, admitting the mistakes of the past was perhaps the most important step DC Studios needed to take. This will help to rebuild the trust of fans and create a sense of why things will be different this time around after years of disappointment. Yeah, so I mean, it's not surprising. Gunn, he has kind of a reputation as being, edgy, and I think that's definitely how he sees himself as like this anti-corporate guy, I'm sure. So it's not really surprising that he's doing that. Now, let's talk about the actual plans for the universe going forward, because there's kind of a question of, are they going to reboot this thing? Are they not going to reboot this thing? Because where is it? There was talk of a reboot, but then there was talk of, oh well, after the Flash, that Ezra Miller's going to stick around as the Flash, and maybe Momoa and Gal Gadot will hang around in their roles. Who knows? I think that's a smokescreen myself. My guess is that they're just kind of putting that out there to give the illusion that the current DCEU still has a future or something, or that it's not just dead on arrival. And because if so, then they know people will be less inclined to see the movies. So they're putting this information out there to try and help stir people into go and seeing the movies. But my guess is that after next year, after all these movies have come and gone, you'll start hearing reports that Ezra Miller's been given the boot as the Flash and other things. Because if you saw that DC slate that they put out, I mean, there was no Aquaman, no Flash, and really even there was a Wonder Woman related project, but that Paradise Lost thing. But even that doesn't have Gal Gadot in it, I don't think. Okay, so here we go. This is, oh, let me share this. So this is from CBR.com. Come on. Okay, so the Flash film will restart the DCEU, but doesn't forget anything. Flash producer Barbara Muschietti. I'm not sure how you say is it Muschietti or Muschietti? I don't know. Paschetti. Uh, anyway, she teased the upcoming movie would restart the DC extended universe without forgetting anything that came before. That doesn't make any sense if you're going to reboot Superman, does it? I don't think so. The Flash solo films, which zooms onto the silver screen in 2022, see veteran DC extended universe star Ezra Miller reprise his role as the fastest man alive, while the movie's release is oh come on. There we go. While the movie's release is still 2 years away. Producer Barbara Muschietti has teased that it will restart the DCU. During a Q&A for the movie at DC Fandom, Muschietti was asked about the movie's plot. She refused to reveal too much about it, but she did tease that The Flash would restart the shared movie universe while also remembering everything that came before. Quote, well, I want you to go see it, so I'm not going to tell you a lot, unquote. But what I will tell you is that it's a ride. It's going to be fun and exciting, and there are a lot of DC characters in it. Flash is the superhero of this film because he is the bridge between all these characters and timelines. In a way, it restarts everything and, and doesn't forget anything. Cues from 2011's Flashpoint by Jeff Johns and Andy Kubert. The Flash will see Barry Allen, aka the Flash, traveling across dimensions and meeting alternate versions of other DC characters. The film will also see Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton reprise their roles as Batman. I mean, is that it? I mean, I thought there was more here. Um, and anyway, hasn't I know I've heard that Affleck his cameo was cut, wasn't it? And I thought that Keaton's was as well, or at least I mean Keaton's not cut out, but his has been reduced, like cut down like to the bare minimum. I don't know. We'll see. And then I got another article relating to this Gunn talking about this same subject. Okay, let me bring this up. Okay, so James Gunn confirms The Flash doesn't erase every part of the DCEU. DC Studios co-chair and co-CEO James Gunn sets the record straight on how upcoming blockbuster The Flash will affect the DC extended universe continuity. This is a blockbuster. Yeah, you wish. The Flash won't reset every part of the DC extended universe, according to DC Studios co-chair and co-CEO James Gunn. Responding to a fan on Instagram, Gunn set the record straight regarding DCEU continuity post Flash. The DC Studios boss clarified that The Flash resets many things, not all things. He added that this means some characters will continue to be portrayed by the same actors in forthcoming DC Universe projects, whereas others will be recast. This tracks with recent DCU casting news, which has seen some legacy DC stars retained and others shown the door. Cavill, in other words. Notably, Henry Cavill stood down as Superman only weeks before Viola Davis signed on to reprise the role of Amanda Waller. James Gunn on Instagram. Flash resets many things, not all things. Some characters will remain the same, some do not. Gunn first indicated that The Flash would serve as a soft reboot of the DCU in January of 2023, while unveiling the revamped shared universe's initial slate of film and TV projects. At the time, Gunn said that The Flash would, quote, reset everything, unquote, apparently a slight overstatement given his more recent comments. He also described the Scarlet Speedster's first standalone outing as, quote, probably one of the greatest superhero movies ever made, unquote, and said that it would lay the groundwork for fellow 2023 DC releases like Blue Beetle and Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom. A key theme in Gunn's DCU announcement was that he and DC Studios co-chair and co-CEO Peter Safran were eager to make the DCU less disconnected than it has been in recent years. To that end, Gunn and Safran's initial chapter of DCU releases will aim to tell, quote, one story across live action and animated movies and TV shows and video games. Gunn also addressed the likes of Matt Reeves' The Batman and Todd Phillips' Joker, confirming that these movies and their respective sequels exist within their own separate universes under the Elseworlds umbrella. The DC Studios co-chair and co-CEO discussed his and Safran's clearly demarcated DCU canon in an interview following the announcement, contrasting it with DC's prior approach to greenlighting projects. And then it just kind of goes over that quote I mentioned earlier. They were just giving away IPs like party favors, et cetera, et cetera. And everything going forward is going to be unified. I think obviously Marvel's done well with the whole idea of the sort of unified, shared continuity with their movies and their streaming shows and animated projects and stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't know if for video games or for cartoons, and I don't know that it's really all that necessary for those to all actually sort of link up. I don't think it's really that important. I don't know. Maybe the average moviegoer on the street, maybe that's going to be a big deal to them. But I don't really think it's that important. And Masters Maniac Mexico says the simple fact they're keeping Ezra, that says it all. Yeah, yeah, you're not wrong. Like I say, I think that he'll probably be gone after next year, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, if they really do seriously keep him after giving Cavill the boot, man, that is going to piss so many people off. Um, and even me. I mean, and I've been kind of pretty sanguine about the whole thing. I mean, I like Cavill in the role. I would like to have seen him stuck around, but when they said they were rebooting, I was like, well, it's probably a cost thing, you know, because they mentioned that if Gal Gadot was going to do another Wonder Woman movie, she would cost like 20 million. If Cavill's going to do another Superman movie, he'll be like probably 20 to 30 million, something like that. So I was like, okay, they want to cast younger so they can make cheaper movies that'll have a better shot at making money. But if then they're just going to turn around and keep Ezra and Godot and Momoa, that really just sort of that just undoes that whole theory. So that's going to be really disappointing if they do indeed do that. All right. So what have I got next here? Okay, so a while back on my channel, I did a video about an article, or a number of articles talking about how 2023 was going to be a year of financial pain for Hollywood, basically, because a lot of these studios are in debt. A lot of the time, it's been because, I mean, like with Disney, it is because for a number of things, partly because they spent so much money buying up other studios and properties. They bought Pixar, they bought Marvel, they bought Lucasfilm, they bought Fox. But on top of that, of course, they, as well as like Warner Brothers and just about every studio in Hollywood, went big into streaming, spending, I'm guessing, I don't know exactly how much, but I'm guessing billions to build the infrastructure and establish their streaming services, and then billions more to produce content for these streaming shows to bring people in. And it just really hasn't worked. I think the only thing that's been profitable as far as streaming has been Netflix, and even Netflix has taken a nosedive in the last year or two. I think with the pandemic sort of winding down and the lockdowns easing. And so now you're seeing multiple stories of some of these big studios, again, companies worth billions, that are looking to perhaps sell off assets in order to avoid or at least relieve some of their debt. We have this story here from Billboard.com. Warner Brothers Discovery is exploring sale of music assets. The assets, which could be worth more than 1 billion, include music and production music from the company's TV and film projects. I don't know how long is this because I haven't read this ahead of time. Okay, this isn't too long, so we'll go ahead and read this. So, Warner Brothers Discovery is exploring a sale of its music assets that could be worth upwards of 1 billion, according to a source familiar with the matter. The catalog is being shopped by famed entertainment attorney Alan Grubman. While the potential sale, which has been reported by the Financial Times, is still in the very early stages, some of Warner Brothers Discovery's current music partners could be potential buyers. Universal Music Group already administers the publishing assets, which are likely the largest part of the deal, and Warner Brothers or Warner Music Group distributes Water Tower Music, Warner Brothers Discovery's in-house record label. The assets being shopped include music and production music from the company's television and film projects, and are not the kind of music rights that have made headlines over the past couple of years as investors have flocked to the music business. Unlike most publishing rights or royalty streams, the Warner Brothers Discovery assets are not tied to the steady growth trend affecting traditional streaming. That's because relatively few people head to Spotify to stream the soundtracks for Game of Thrones, The White Lotus, or Batman, for example, even if the television and film projects are smash successes. As such, these type of assets have historically traded lower than popular music rights, typically in the single-digit multiples. The asset valuations are likely to be tied to broadcast trends, which are growing slower for film and television than for music. And Masters Maniac Mexico says, even in my area, the same happens. Arrogance kills. In action figures, it's Hasbro. So you're an action figure collector? Yeah, Hasbro's just they're not making smart moves. Well, I mean, I've already covered Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast and a couple of previous live streams, so I won't get off onto that whole tangent here. But the last live stream I did, which was I guess 2 weeks ago, I talked about or touched on the issues that Hasbro is having. But it was mainly talking about TSR, and I did another one back, I think, in November, talking about Hasbro's financial difficulties. Maybe I'll go back to that at some point. So the where was I here? Okay, so the asset valuations will likely be tied to broadcast trends, which are growing slower for film and television than for music. But due to the depth of the catalog, which dates back decades, the package will likely be seen as an attractive and stable investment for any major music company or private equity fund. Warner Brothers Discovery formed last year through the merger of AT&T's Warner Media Unit and Discovery Inc. Warner Brothers Discovery, UMG, and Grubman did not respond to requests for comment at the time of publishing. WMG declined to comment. Warner Brothers Discovery was formed last year, blah, blah. Okay, this is just kind of boilerplate stuff. So again, so Warner Brothers looking to sell off its music library, not something that you'd be doing if things were going well. And then there's more. Let me bring up this one. This is a story from Variety. Okay, so HBO Max series like Westworld to land at third-party ad-based streamers as Warner Brother Discovery's plans to launch its own. So Warner Brothers Discovery has announced a plan to license some of its canceled and pulled programming to third-party free ad-supported television channels or fast channels. Additionally, the company says it will announce plan for its own proprietary fast channel in 2023. Warner Brothers Discovery shocked the industry on Monday when it learned that all 4 seasons of Westworld would be pulled from HBO Max after being canceled earlier this year. This wasn't the first move of its kind. The company infamously canceled its Batgirl movie this summer as it was nearing completion and has pulled several lower profile items from its back catalog. And more recently, HBO Max axed several buzzy unscripted originals. Given that Westworld was once a major hit and a hallmark series for the HBO brand, the news seemed to signal that no content was safe in the face of CEO David Zaslav's extreme cost-cutting strategy. Despite that, Westworld will at least avoid slipping into complete obscurity. It will be removed from HBO Max in the coming days, along with The Nevers, Raised by Wolves, F, F Boy Island, ay, 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 Legendary, Finding Magic Mike, Head of the Class, and The Time Traveler's Wife. As I read this, I'm like just really glad I don't have HBO Max. But Warner Brothers Discovery says that it's preparing to transition each into new third party deals. We are incredibly proud of Westworld and the remarkable work of our cast and crew, series creators Jonathan Nola and Lisa Joyce said in a statement. We are excited to have the opportunity to welcome a whole new audience to our show. There still remains hope for other programs recently announced to be coming off of HBO Max, though the circumstances surrounding their deals are more complicated. While the IP for Westworld and the like are owned by Warner Brothers Discovery, others are produced by outside studios that now govern the negotiating process. Therefore, Gordita Chronicles, Love Life, Made for Love, The Garcias, and Minx. Well, I never heard of these things. Will also leave HBO Max in the coming days, but according to Warner Brothers Discovery, the studio partners behind each aim to set the projects at other platforms. F Boy Island, huh? Okay. So, as all these different studios started getting their own streaming services up and running, you saw a trend of these studios starting to pull their IPs, the franchises they owned, off of other platforms and other channels and onto their streaming service. Of course, behind the paywall where you would have to pay them in order to see it, which makes sense. If you have this valuable asset, you want to have it so that it's profiting you, not someone else. But I think the problem with that has been that some folks don't like a lot of this stuff. And it's, like I think Game of Thrones is a good example. I mean, everybody loved Game of Thrones, and I think it was a brilliant show for the first, four. I think about the first four seasons. Then season 5 and 6 were like, okay, not great. Then 8 was like, okay, this is getting bad. Or no, season 7 was like, okay, this is getting bad. And then season 8 was just a mess. And it turned a lot of people off afterwards. So I understand the thought of wanting to keep them behind a paywall where you benefit. But if you're not getting the subscribers that you'd like to have, and it seems like almost all these subscribing services aren't, except maybe, but and even Netflix, they've lost subscribers, I think, over the last year or so. And I think what this signals here with this story is that you're maybe going to see more of these studios start to farm their titles and their shows out again, like they had before, to other streaming services, like all those CW shows. They were licensed to, I think, like Hulu and a couple other streaming services, and that was bringing in money to Warner Brothers. I don't know how much it was, but it was enough, I guess, that it was better than nothing. Let's put it that way. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the shows that are popular on streaming they're not all these new shows that grab headlines and you see all the press about. On Netflix, before they were taken off, like the most popular shows on Netflix, it wasn't Stranger Things or other original shows that they had. It was stuff like Friends. I think Friends was hugely popular, and Seinfeld, and like ER, and old shows like that. And you would think with that the Peacock network would probably be more successful than it is, but I guess it's not. And I wonder if this is going to be a growing trend. You're going to see them starting to license these popular titles back out to other streaming services again in order to scrounge up some extra income. Okay, and we talked about Warner Brothers. And actually, we'll do this too, um, because hey, why not kick them when they're down? So I stumbled across this one on Motley Fool. Three reasons to avoid Warner Brothers Discovery stock in 2023. So let's just go over this. The media merger disappointed in 2022. It still faces several challenges. Investors had high hopes for Warner Brothers Discovery when the stock went public last April. However, the media merger thus far has been a disappointment. The stocks fell quickly after the new company was formed last April and is down 54% since then. When the Warner Brothers Discovery resulted from the merger between AT&T's Warner Media spinoff and Discovery Communications, and the company owns a number of high-profile media assets. Those include the Warner Brothers Studio, HBO, the Turner Network, such as CNN, TNT, and TBS, and Discovery's cable channels like HGTV and the Food Network, in addition to the Discovery branded channels. However, investors hoping for a comeback from the streaming stock in 2023 may want to look elsewhere. Here's why you're better off avoiding Warner Brothers Discovery stock this year. Number one, Warner Brothers Discovery is loaded with debt. Warner Brothers Discovery is the end result of AT&T's disastrous acquisition of Time Warner for $100 billion in 2018. AT&T funded that acquisition with debt and passed 43 billion of it on to Warner Brothers Discovery when they spun it off. As most of as of its most recent quarter, Warner Brothers Discovery had 50 million in debt, which is especially problematic at a time when interest rates are rising. In its most recent quarter, it said 550 million in interest expense for an annual run rate of 2.2 billion. I'm sorry, no, it paid. I'm sorry, it paid 555 million in interest expense for an annual run rate of 2.2 billion, and that figure could go up. The company has more than 18 billion in debt maturing in the next 5 years, and if interest rates remain elevated, it will likely have to refinance at a higher rate. The origin of the company has only added to Warner Brothers Discovery's problems. Management has accused AT&T of mismanaging the company and forced it to pay 1.2 billion for inflating the value of some assets. Shareholders have also filed a class action lawsuit alleging that HBO Max subscriber numbers were inflated prior to the merger. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. By including AT&T subscribers who got the service for free and never used it. And the merger between AT&T and Time Warner, HBO also lost much of the talent that drove its success for many years, making its strategic direction look aimless. And that's one thing, I think people maybe don't take into consideration. They have these bundling deals where you'll get a streaming service thrown in. Like I've heard that I think Verizon, the phone company, they do that where if you buy one of their phones, it's got Disney Plus on it. So if you sign up for Verizon, well, now you've got Disney Plus. So those numbers will be added as Disney Plus subscribers, but a lot of the people don't even know they have it and don't use it. Okay, so number two, its profitable divisions are declining. Investors were attracted to Warner Brothers Discovery largely because of the streaming business, but it still faces the same problem that other legacy media businesses do. It's losing money in streaming. And its other two businesses, its cable networks and studios, are profitable but experiencing declining revenue. Cord cutting has been hastened by the growth of streaming, and in the third quarter of 2022, revenue from Warner Brothers Discovery's cable networks fell 8% on a currency neutral pro forma basis to 5.2 billion. Its studio segment saw revenue decline 5% to 3.1 billion on the same basis, while even moviegoers returned to theaters as pandemic fears ebbed. Despite the recovery from the pandemic, the long-term trend in moviegoing has been declining. Box office ticket sales peaked in 2002, and as a home entertainment option, and as at-home entertainment options get even better, the decline is likely to continue. Even revenue in the streaming segment declined 6% to 2.3 billion in the third quarter. This was as wholesale distribution revenue declined, in part from the decision to stop selling services through Amazon channels, though Warner Brothers Discovery reversed that decision in December. Warner Brothers Discovery finished the quarter with a generally accepted accounting principles operating loss of 2.2 billion and a free cash flow loss of 192 million. Given the decline of its most profitable businesses, those losses could get even worse, especially as CEO David Zaslav has warned that the ad market is particularly weak heading into 2023. Let me take a drink of water here. Just okay. So number three, competition is intense. No streaming service aside from Netflix is currently profitable, but the arms race in the industry is continuing. Amazon spent an estimated 15 billion on content in 2022. We know, I think we know where a lot of that money went. And big tech companies like Amazon and Alphabet went for a piece of the sports market, each recently acquired rights to stream NFL games. Warner Brothers Discovery's TNT network could lose rights to air NBA games when they expire in 2024. And CEO David Zaslav has been busy culling underperforming assets and content, just as larger companies seem to be angling for a greater portion of the sports world and a wider audience. At this point, Zaslav seems to be aiming to cut his way to profitability, but that might lead the company to lose subscribers to rivals, something it can ill afford to do when its cable ecosystem is falling apart. And I think we kind of saw an example of that with the previous article. I talked about they're looking to sell off their musical assets. So Warner Brothers Discovery has a heavy debt burden, challenges in both its legacy and streaming businesses, inherited problems from AT&T, and T, and a set of deep-pocketed competitors, including Apple, Netflix, Walt Disney, Amazon, and Alphabet vying for content. That means it's likely to have another difficult year in 2023. There's still a lot of work to do to get the company on the right track. Okay. And I don't have a link to it here, but I saw Masters Maniac Mexico. I actually saw a recent story on Motley Fool about Hasbro too, because what is their stock at now? Let me look up Hasbro's stock right quick, because I know it's down, down, down. Okay, so it's currently at 57.38, and I think it's down like 30%, 35% or something like that year over year. About a third. And I saw a story on Motley Fool recently where it said they had a guy, an analyst, talking about it, and he said that he thinks that stock is actually overvalued. He said the real value of Hasbro stock is probably more like 15 to 20, something like that. In other words, they're probably being sold at about what, three, four times what they're actually worth. Or, well, no, two to three times what it's actually worth. And basically was advising everybody to sell, 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 and get away because this stuff's going down the drain. And I think that that's why they did that very quick reversal on the whole OGL thing. I assume you know about that. Wizards of the Coast was going to change the open gaming license, but they've done a complete reversal. And I think a lot of it was because all the issues they're having with their stock. They have enough problems already, and they were afraid if they had more people canceling their D&D Beyond subscriptions and boycotting that D&D movie, it was going to get really, really ugly for them. And that's why they switched around on that. Okay, so we talked about Warner Brothers. Let's talk about Disney. I got another one here because they're feeling the pinch as well. They're not, our Warner Brothers isn't the only one looking to sell off assets. So this is on Variety. Disney CEO Bob Iger on potential Hulu sale. Everything is on the table right now. Let me get rid of this. Oh, so with Bob Iger back in the CEO seat at Disney, will he look to grab full ownership of Hulu from Comcast, or will the company sell its stake as it looks to refocus its streaming portfolio? Iger, not yet 90 days into his reprise as Disney's CEO, was noncommittal on the question of Hulu's future when asked in an interview Thursday on CNBC's Squawk on the Street. Disney currently owns 67% of Hulu, and Comcast owns the remaining 33%. Everything is on the table right now, so I'm not going to speculate whether we are a buyer or a seller of Hulu, he said. But I obviously have suggested that I'm concerned about undifferentiated general entertainment, particularly in the competitive landscape that we are operating in. And we are going to look at it very objectively and expansively. Comcast and Disney inked their deal in May 2019, which gave Disney control of Hulu. Comcast has the right to sell its ownership stake to Disney as early as 2024 or January. And conversely, Disney can require Comcast to sell it at that point. Prior to Iger stepping back at the helm, ex CEO Bob Chapek had expressed an interest in doing a deal with Comcast to bring Hulu fully into the Mouse House fold sooner rather than later. While Comcast CEO Brian Roberts countered that he'd be interested in buying out Disney's majority share. Iger's comments about Hulu come after Disney beat Wall Street earnings estimates for the December 2022 quarter. Iger announced that Disney is eliminating 7,000 jobs, part of a strategy to reduce costs by 5.5 billion, and announced a reorganization of the company into three core business segments. Disney Entertainment, headed by co-chairs Dana Walden and Alan Bergman, ESPN, led by Jimmy Pitaro, and Disney Parks Experiences and Products, led by Josh DeMarco. In the period, Hulu gained 800,000 subscribers in the quarter to stand at 4.0 million at the end of 2022. Meanwhile, Disney Plus registered its first ever decline in subscribers, shedding 2.4 million, driven by losses at Disney Plus Hotstar, the version of the service available in India and parts of Southeast Asia. Under the terms of the Disney Comcast deal for Hulu, the guaranteed floor value of Hulu is around 27.5 billion, meaning Comcast's stake is worth a minimum of roughly 9.2 billion. As of December 31st, 2022, NBC Universal's interest in Hulu was recorded on Disney's financial statements at 8.7 billion, according to Disney's latest 10Q filing with the SEC. Amid the uncertainty about Hulu, Disney paid $900 million to Major League Baseball in November 2022 to buy out the league's remaining 15% stake in BAMTech. All told, Disney paid some $3.8 billion to acquire BAMTech, which formed the basis of the group that manages business and operations for Disney's streaming portfolio. Interesting. Separately Tuesday, billionaire investor Norman Pelt said he was dropping his proxy fight with Disney, in which he was angling to nab a seat on the board following Iger's restructuring announcement. Now, Disney plans to do everything we wanted them to do, Pelt said, also in an interview on CNBC. Yeah, so this guy, he was trying to pull off some kind of I don't know if hostile takeover is the right word, but he was trying to elbow his way onto the board of directors so he could, I think, with the goal of eventually ousting Iger, maybe because he felt like they weren't doing enough to be profitable. But now he's claiming victory in effect. But yeah, so even Disney, even they're having financial issues. They're losing subscribers, they're losing money for various reasons. I won't get into all of it. That could be a stream in and of itself. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and call it at 7. So we got about 10 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to Super Team Family blog and do that. I haven't done that for a few weeks. And we'll just take a look at some of these fictional covers. And this is at braventheboldlost.blogspot.com. And this is a website of fictional comic covers. If you've watched my previous live streams, I'm assuming you know about this, but maybe there's somebody listening who isn't familiar. It's a website where a guy does various fictional covers, and we'll just go ahead and start with this one. So this is Batman and Black Widow, and I recognize the Widow figure because that's by George Perez. and I think it's all George Perez except for the Batman figure, which is Aparo, I believe. But this is from a Black Widow. Was it a one shot or a mini series that was published like right in the end of the 70s, like right around 79, I think it was, maybe 80. It was like one of her first big solo stories. And it was also one of one of Marvel's first direct sales projects that was set in the Marvel universe and wasn't, a story that was separate from that. And as I recall, it's pretty solid. It's nothing revolutionary, but it was solid and it had that great Perez art. So, hey, I love that. Don't know where that Batman figure is from, though. Okay, Batman and Blue Falcon and Dynomutt. So, those of you who are of a certain age may remember Blue Falcon and Dynomutt from their cartoon in the, I don't know, was it a late 70s? I'd say it was around the late 70s, like 78, somewhere around in that area. And they're basically a couple of superheroes who fight crime, but it was comedic. It was obviously done for laughs. But this cover has them teaming up with Batman and the dog. Of course, it's a robot dog, so it talks. Okay, what next? Batman and the cat. And again, I don't recognize the figures from the cover right off, but the cat was a character that Marvel introduced like in the late 70s. In the late 70s, Marvel had a kind of significant push to introduce more female characters. And, probably Ms. Marvel is one of them. She-Hulk. She-Hulk's probably the most well-known one. And then there was also Spider-Woman, and this character, the cat, was another example. And this character, the cat, she would later go on to become a different character called Tigra. And then her costume would be taken by another person and become a character called Hellcat, who would later join the Avengers. Okay, Batman and the Dark Knight. Oh, okay, so this is teaming up Batman with the Frank Miller Dark Knight version of Batman. Interesting. Batman and Robin have returned to Wayne Manor, but guess who is waiting to welcome them home? And this is that I think is that Neil Adams? I think the Batman and Robin and Alfred. I think that's Neil Adams, or is that might be Aparo? Yeah, I think that's Aparo. Actually, yeah, that's who it is. And of course, that's Miller doing the Dark Knight character in the shadows there. I mean, once upon a time, that would be a real wild idea having these two characters meet. And these covers I'm showing you, these are from like 2010. The guy's been doing this for over a decade now. But I started with the oldest ones and started working my way forward. And I think we've pretty much seen, if not this exact team up, something very similar in the comics more than once, really. All right, Batman and the Defenders. Now, the Dark Knight Reborn. Will it be his friend or foe? I'm trying to remember. This is a Defenders cover, of course. I'm trying to remember the issue. This was from who's the artist? So this is what Perez, oh, and Wyasek. Okay, interesting. I didn't realize that was Perez art. That's cool. I didn't know Perez had done any Defenders covers, to be honest. Let's see. So Batman and the Doom Patrol. And I believe this is actually a Brave and the Bold cover. Or actually, we know, no, it says, but it's got this here, down here, a Nemesis story. So that means this issue had a Nemesis backup story in it. So this was probably a cover from Detective, because in the late 70s, Nemesis was a backup feature in Detective Comics, I believe. So, but I don't recognize the cover though. but that's definitely a Paro art. Okay, Batman and the Falcon. And what is so it's Batman and Falcon facing Kraven the Hunter. That would be an interesting pairing between the two of them. And Kraven would make a pretty cool opponent for Batman. I think the issue would be though is that Batman already has a villain kind of like that. There's a the villain Catman is basically this his character is the same basic idea as Kraven. He's this big game hunter who's been so successful at hunting animals that basically there's no challenge to it for him anymore. So then he decides to hunt a superhero in order to sort of challenge himself. And let's see, what do we got next here? Okay, Batman and the Fantastic Four, and that's John Byrne, Fantastic Four, obviously. And I forget which cover. This is from. Let me get rid of that. Okay, I think this is from. So John Byrne did a cover or did an issue of Fantastic Four where the art was sideways. Basically, instead of reading the pages from top to bottom, you had to put the issue on its side and then read the story from left to right. You know, it completely altered the perspective on the issue. And I think it was maybe issue 152. Was that it? I don't remember sure, but that's what this art for the Fantastic Four, I believe that's where that comes from. Okay. And you know, he will sometimes do team ups that you wouldn't really see in a comic ever. And obviously this is one of them, Batman and the Fonz. Last chance, Fonzarelli, leave Gotham immediately and don't come back. I don't really know what to say to that. That's I believe that's Norm Brayfogle doing Batman. I don't know who that is Tron Fonzie though. Okay, Batman and the Gargoyle. And this is an interesting team up. So Gargoyle's one of my he's one of the he's a Marvel character I'm actually really fond of, and I think is kind of underrated. The Gargoyle was in the Defenders for a long time in the from the late 70s into the early 80s. And I don't know, after he left the Defenders, after that original Defenders series got canceled, it's like he's kind of fallen down the memory hole. He doesn't really pop up much anymore, which is too bad. I always thought he was a cool character. I wouldn't mind seeing them bring him back and seeing him teaming up with Batman would be interesting from a visual standpoint, if nothing else. Okay, Batman Brave and the Bull, or Batman and the Freedom Fighters, excuse me. The death of Batman. Batman is dead and it's our fault. So I'm not sure where the Batman figure is from in the foreground, but the Freedom Fighters in the background, that's a cover from their series back in the 70s. In the original cover, Uncle Sam is holding, I think he's holding Wonder Woman in his arm. And he's saying, Wonder Woman is dead. It's our fault. Then, so Batman and Green Hornet, seduction of Vicky Vale. And that would be an interesting pairing between Batman and Green Hornet. Of course, Batman and Green Hornet did have a crossover on television back in the late 60s when, of course, the Adam West show was on, and there was also the Green Hornet TV show that had Bruce Lee in it. They had, I don't remember if it was one or two episodes, but they had an episode or a story where the two characters sort of crossed paths and teamed up. Let's see. And then Batman and the Green Lantern Corps. Batman is ready for a rematch with the Joker, and this time he's bringing back up. I don't know. I don't remember what cover these Green Lantern figures come from. I should know that one, but I don't. And I'll probably go ahead and stop here because I think we're right about at 8 o'clock. So Batman and the Haunted Tank. And I guess so it's positing that Batman is dead and now he's a ghost haunting the tank himself. That's an interesting idea. It's not a team up that really would be easy to pull off. That would be a tough one. Anyway, I'll go ahead and wrap it up here. I want to thank the folks who showed up, and I'll probably be back next weekend with another stream. Thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you all next time. Have a good night.